All right, picture this. What if you could take the most nutrient-packed superfoods on the planet, foods that have fueled humans for centuries, and actually make them taste great and amazing, make it easy to eat? That's usually pretty impossible, but my guest today, James Barry, cracked that code. He used to be a celebrity chef, cooked for people like George Clooney, Tom Cruise, and so many others. And he realized that this ancient way of eating is actually the way to go. In this modern way we're all living, diets are they're really bad. They're all over the place, but we break it down on this podcast. So you're going to get a mix of diets and how to use this ancestral way of eating that James talks about and has now built this brand called Pluck around. We'll dig into that, but why it's going to help you as an entrepreneur, as a human, to feel better, make better decisions, have more longevity in anything you're doing. But James also breaks down his reinventions throughout all of his years, even before being a celebrity chef. It's an awesome story of how he even got into that. So he's going to break it down and then give you a path to try some of this stuff out yourself. He's also hooking you up with a pretty cool discount to his products at Pluck. Just go to hustleandflowchart.com/PLUCK. Go try them out. It's awesome. I recommend them. And you're going to love James. So let's get into the episode. Marketers have never been so spread thin. Like with all this stuff happening, technology is going crazy. It's really tough to really focus and get creative and create great content or connect with the customers like we used to, or even prospects. So, you're trying to launch a bunch of content campaigns, you're generating leads, you're trying to score the leads, you're nurturing them, so much more, but you really don't have enough time to even breathe, let alone do the best marketing out there. But HubSpot's trying to fix that for you. They have a new AI. It's built into the system called Breeze. So it combines their marketing hub and the content hub with all these different cool features that help you automate and, remix your content into a whole bunch of different types, score your leads in a better way, and actually have a nice look at the analytics and everything that's going on in your business. So I would recommend to stop spreading yourself out so thin and start making some big moves with HubSpot. You can try it out for yourself. Go visit hubspot.com/marketers to learn more. Hey, before you get into the episode, I urge you to hit pause and go check out the AI Digital Mind. It's like a digital twin of this podcast and a whole bunch of other content I've released. Go to hustleandflowchart.com/AI Joe. It's hustleandflowchart.com/AI Joe. You can literally chat with this podcast with me and my guests in text, audio, and video for free. If you want one of these made for yourself, if you're interested, go to hustleandflowchart.com/interest, and we make these things out. So enjoy. Let's get to the episode. All right, James, we're doing this. I appreciate you for making the time today. And I guess we'll just start off. How are you feeling today? Are you feeling pretty good? I shouldn't answer that for you. How you doing?
I'm feeling really taken care of. There's been a lot of learnings. Probably some of the biggest learnings I've had in the 4 years of the business that started at the end of 2024 and going into this year. It's kind of like the learnings are like what got you here is not going to get you there. It's that kind of learnings.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling, when they first came up, I was feeling like I was slowly, falling to the bottom of the ocean, weighted down.
Why?
Hello. But now I'm like, oh, I'm being lifted up. There's so many people that are available and that are really helping to be guides and mentors. And so I feel very, very blessed and taken care of.
That's big. And as an entrepreneur of any sort, I mean, you are in the food space, culinary space. A lot of us work alone, or at least we feel like we're alone. So it's interesting because you were telling me you've had some perspective shifts and, you've had some outside perspective shifts. Do you have some internal as well? Or do you reflect? Do you have a process for that?
I mean, I'm definitely aware of it. I think that there's definitely an aspect of imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I've never run a CPG company. So
Yeah.
that right there kind of supports imposter syndrome when you're entering a field that you're not as familiar with. but I'm also very determined and I'm feeling scrappy and I'm just like, I'm gonna figure this out. And I think I'm able to, at my age, to reflect back at my life and go, okay, well, I've done like, 4 or 5 marathons. I've done a triathlon. Like I got through that.
Yeah.
I could do this. And I'm a father and I'm a husband of 13 years. You're like, it's like, okay, I've endured a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
I have kids that are healthy and happy, like, okay, I've done that. So I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to take things wherever I can.
Mm.
Um, and apply them when I am feeling kind of less than, or when I am feeling like there's a mountain in front of me. I'll share. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
Just gives an example, a model of how I'm pulling from everything.
That's
But
great.
like, it's snowing right now where I live, and
Oh,
I mean
yeah.
not literally snowing, but there's snow on the ground.
Huh?
And I walk my daughter, my youngest daughter, to school every weekday, and we walk sometimes through a forest. And I sometimes wear these shoes that really kind of slip in the snow. But I noticed that if I walk in the footprints of people that came before me, I don't slip as much. And
Yeah.
I was even taking from that going like, oh, that's a business mantra right there. It's like, don't feel like you have to create your own footsteps. Like there's plenty of people that have come before me. I can just see what they did, replicate it and apply it to my business and just step in their footsteps. It's still my footstep, but I don't
Yeah.
have to reinvent.
I like that.
I don't have to go it alone.
Ooh, yeah, I can relate both, specifically to the scenario you're talking about. I mean, I'm in San Diego. It doesn't snow much. It might though. It just snowed in Florida. Who knows? So,
That's true,
but
right? It's coming.
yeah. But I know the fact. I know you say it. Like, I've slipped many times because I don't experience snow much. But walking in footsteps, you're right. It's easier. But at the same time, yeah, a lot of us in business just feel like we're kind of lone soldiers going out for it. We know what's best, or maybe we're imposter syndrome stops us from asking questions or asking for help. I know that's a pretty common one. I see it in my mastermind of like high level entrepreneurs every time. And they even admit it. They're like, yeah, I don't like to ask for help, or it just doesn't feel right.
That I will say is not my issue. And
That's
and
good.
it's because I did have a business that I did go alone a lot, and I didn't ask as many questions, and I felt the negative effects of that. I felt the isolation. I felt the kind of suppression slash hardship that I created from not asking questions. So I'm very like, I entered this business that I'm currently in, um, I entered it very conscious of making sure that the business plan was also included my health plan. I,
Uh-huh.
I was like very aware of like, hey, our schedules are fictional. Like this idea that we have to do this ABC is completely false. It's all made up because you can go around the world and you can see the work week, the hours, the work day, and the work week are completely different
Mm,
depending on what country you're in.
sure.
So there is no streamed like everyone has to do this. It's particularly if you're working in e-commerce, it's what you create and what you communicate. So I was very aware of that. And then the third thing was that I was very aware that I was going to enter this learning like in a learning mode of like I was going to ask questions and I was not going to fake it till I make it. I was going to be very transparent about that process. But what's interesting is by having even that clarity of those points I just made,
Yeah.
it also helps me be more clear with my instincts. Like I'm like my ears are primed, so I'm very like I'm listening, I'm looking for signs, I'm looking for clarity, but I'm also coming at it from a heart-centered place.
Yeah. You're grounded.
Yeah, so I'm grounded and open.
Yeah, that's cool. I just interviewed a gentleman, Kevin Cerez. He's a big, he has like 94 patents. And, one of the things he said was like, I just have to expand, put myself in a good, joyous place, finding joy, but that allows him to be more open to the possibilities. And you can solve better problems that way, or problems people don't normally see. It kind of sounds like what you've done. You've allowed yourself to get that guidance and, yeah, not hack it alone, which is so common. Yeah.
And what I'm also learning, this is a slight step away from business, but I think it will serve everyone, is that I'm also learning, well, taking what he said, like, so tapping the joy, but how do you tap the joy? Like, how do you co-create an environment where you can tap joy? And I'm finding what helps the most is routine,
Mm.
and making sure that that routine has exercise or movement attached to it, because that does co-create joy when it
Mhm.
creates happiness, because the endorphins from working out
Yep.
actually chemically create happiness. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like building that routine, I wake up at the same time every day. I work out at the same time every day, and I go to sleep at the same time every day. And that routine has absolutely made a huge difference in not
Mm.
only my state of mind, but also getting shit done.
Yeah. No, absolutely. 'Cause if you're not routine with something that you can control like that, then like how can you adapt to the world around you that's constantly in motion, you know?
And
And
it just, and that's the trick, right? Everyone thinks like, oh, like if I reach this level of success, then it's not going to be as chaotic. It's like, no, it
no way.
is. You just have new problems. Like, you don't reach, there isn't a point where you're like, oh, you're just gliding, and you're just
Mm.
like, oh, like business is so easy. It's like, it's just new problems.
Yeah. Yeah, you never made it, right? Like there's
Yeah,
no making it. Like you might find that summit, that peak, but then you're like, guess what? There's a ton more. It keeps going. And that's the
it
journey
really
of life.
does.
Yeah.
There's always something to learn.
You have a really interesting background I want to get into because there's a lot of different angles we'll explore here, and I like where we've already gone, James. And you've been in food for a lot of years. Celebrity chefing. I'm sure you did some stuff before that. I want to learn about because, and then you've obviously now CPG. You have your own products, Pluck. So I'll just shout it out now. Eat Pluck is the domain. Actually, you hooked us up with the cool little coupon code, so we'll mention that in a little bit. But I want to really set the stage because you've been in food for a long time. You've worked with a ton of celebrities, or cooked food for them, probably educated them on some stuff maybe they haven't known about. People like what George Clooney, Barbara Streisand, yeah, some pretty
Tom
large names.
Cruise, yeah,
Yeah,
Tom
yeah,
Cruise.
Tom Cruise, pretty large. So I guess I'm curious, what was your experience with food growing up? It sounds like there was a switch that happened, and I'm curious, why food and why do you go down this journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. My mom always laughs. She's like, I don't know how I got a chef for a son, because in the household I grew up in, you knew dinner was ready because the smoke detector went off. Like,
Was she doing the cooking or your
oh,
dad?
she was doing the cooking, and she grew up in culture. It's like where you cook things to death. You overcook them to make sure there was no pathogens. Like, that's how she was raised. So like, hamburgers, we dubbed them hockey pucks. Like,
Oh, geez.
they were that hard. You could throw them against the wall and they bounce right back at you like
Plunk.
a frisbee.
Yeah, yeah.
But so to this day, it was like, it's like, how did I get in this field? But there's some spark that happened when I first learned how to scramble an egg. And
Mhm.
I think for me, what didn't put me down that path when I was a young kid was that I didn't see it as a job. I didn't see it as a career path. It's easy for people to think that the culinary fields have always been about celebrities and game shows and food shows and all that stuff, but it's like that stuff did not exist in the 70s. It's like, I grew up, there was two cooking shows that I remember as a kid. There might have only been one at the time, but when I was watching TV in my middle school age years, I remember two, and it was Julia Childs
Mhm.
and it was The Frugal Gourmet. Those were the two I remember, and they were both on PBS.
Uh-huh.
Like, that's it. There was nothing else.
Wow.
And so the path for cooking was you have to own a restaurant, and I was like, I don't want to do that. My dad owned a grocery store, and he would work these long hours, and I just remember, like, I remember a certain point in my life where I would go to bed and he wasn't home, and I would wake up and he wasn't home, so he had come
Jeez.
home and slept in between those two times.
Mm.
And I was a sensitive kid, so I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until 9/11 that I re-looked at my life, and I was like, okay, life is life is precious. I feel like that was our generation's Pearl Harbor, you know? So I was like,
Mhm.
I need to make sure that every decision I make henceforth is really heart centered. It's coming from a place of mission and wanting and why I'm here on this earth. And so I was at the time I was substitute teaching or kind of working in the education system, and I was in Hollywood system. I was an actor and working in that arena,
Mhm.
and I liked the art of creating things from scratch. I love the creativity that came with the film and TV business,
Yeah.
but I didn't like I didn't really enjoy the LA school system, the LA Unified, and so I was kind of like, well, what do I want to do? And I looked back, well, what did I love as a kid? And it was cooking.
Mhm.
So I then switched gears, went to culinary school, came out of culinary school, and how I think we all know when we've tapped into maybe a source that's bigger than us is this what's happened? This is what happened for me as an actor. I was working so hard. I was putting out 200%, and I maybe got back 30%,
Wow.
maybe. And
Getting back
that's
meaning in terms of like what financial money gain or
financial or
enjoyment.
opportunity, anything. Like I had to really create my own opportunity in that field. It did not come effortlessly,
Mhm.
and I think most actors and people in entertainment experience that. But what's interesting is they just don't have the contrast. So then when I moved towards the culinary field, I put out 100%. I got back 200%. The manifestation that happened was off the charts. I would literally, I mean, Joe is crazy. I would literally think I want to cook for rock bands,
Mhm.
and a week, 2 weeks later, I would get a call. Hey, do you want to be the vegan chef on the Vans Warp Tour, where you tour for 60 days around the U.S. and Canada, and you cook for over 200 bands? And I was like,
Heck yeah.
okay, like
That'd
it
be a
was like
blast.
it was so fast, and there was true manifestation happening. So I felt like, okay, I'm onto something here, and then it took me to the path of eventually starting a meal delivery service to then eventually starting a CBG company.
Wow. Okay. That's a cool path. And I love so it sounds like you've been tapped in and kind of this grounded feeling throughout the whole thing. And yeah, okay. So was there I'm curious on the food side specifically, like so you said scrambled an egg, that was like the aha moment. Yeah, and you weren't raised a home where, it was a different style of cooking. Like was there a because I thought I read you were kind of a picky eater as well.
Oh my
Like and
gosh.
yeah, yeah. Like was there a
I was a
switch?
very picky eater. I didn't have my first taco till I was in college. If we went and I grew up in California, right? So it's a big
Okay.
deal.
That is. I'm in San
um,
Diego, so I know. Yeah.
yeah, oh, San Diego has such good Mexican food.
Yeah, it is.
We would go to a Mexican restaurant when I was a kid, and I would order a hamburger. Like that's how
You're
bad I
one of
was.
those guys.
I was bad, and I wouldn't even eat the hamburger. I was paleo
Yeah.
before there was even a word for it. So when I was a kid and we'd be going on our road trips,
Mm.
most people back then, of course, stopped at fast food, and so we would stop at like McDonald's, and it would always take us longer because I would not eat a burger as it was. Like I
Yeah.
didn't like, I still don't like ketchup and condiments on my burger,
Yeah.
um, and I didn't like meat and bread.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So what they would get is they would have to order a plain burger, and then I would get it and I would pull the meat out from the bread and pretend I was eating because I didn't want to be freaky, right? So I was pretending I
Uh,
was eating it, and then I'd crumple it up and throw it away. So I was only eating meat from a
Jeez.
burger and nothing else,
Like, why
paleo
is James
style.
pounding ten burgers every yeah.
Totally. I was like, God, if I had just known that was paleo, I could have, been there before someone else.
Right? Yeah, it's all marketing, man.
Yeah.
But well, I'm curious, like with with the celebrity thing. So it sounds like there was probably a crossover from when you did some stuff in Hollywood. Maybe you kind of learned, maybe there's a little network there. Don't really want to go down that so much, but I'm curious if there were some learnings, when you're with celebrities, like I guess both ways. Like, was there some teaching that you were doing to them about food, or were you learning from those experiences that you were able to take away?
It was pretty cool, actually. I was in my 30s when I went to culinary school, so I was not a young pup, and I wasn't easily swayed. I got into it very clear and like this is what I want to do, and I want to help people. Like
Yeah.
I want to work one on one and help people with their health. So the school I went to in New York that doesn't exist anymore, it very much kind of fused nutrition and culinary schools. So you not only were learning how to cook things, but you were learning why that cooking method was important, or why that preparation helped to make it more digestible and more nutrient dense or bioavailable. So it was very all encompassing around health. And it was a school where a lot of people looking for private chefs were reaching out to. Now, I didn't know that when I signed up, but I got all of my first 2 years of jobs from referrals from the school. And that was because of how I showed up. So I also was like, some kids were right out of high school and they would like not show up. They were like excited to be in New York and just kind of fluffing it off. And I was like, no, I'm here. Like I'm here to learn, and I'm only here to learn. And so I showed up every day, and the school noticed that, and I worked hard, and they were like, oh, well, we know we can depend on him. So that was a huge for me. And I got so many referrals. But the story that I had with my very first client, private client, kind of tells you a little bit about how it was with all of my clients. So here I was 30. I had just externed at a rehab center in Malibu, and they offered me a job as an assistant to the chef there, and it only was going to pay $9 an hour. So here I was, 30 years old, looking at $9 an hour. I was making $27 an hour substitute teaching. So it shows you how far I had fallen financially by just changing careers, and how at the time the culinary arts really didn't, they still don't pay very well. So I was crying when I got offered that job. I was like, I can't survive off of this. And this isn't what I got in here to do. And then I got a call, and it was the assistant of this CBS newscaster, fairly big name back in the day. And they were like, hey, we're looking for a private chef. You come referred by the school. We're looking for someone to calorie count, to do low fat, to do this, to do that. And I was like, I heard them talk, and I was like, that's not me. I'm sorry. I don't think I can deliver for you. And here I was, though, needing this job, and I still did not waver from what I believed was right. And so I just said, I don't think I'm the right person for the job. That's not what I do. And she then said, well, what do you do? And I shared. I said, well, I don't believe we need to calorie count when we focus on quality of product. I believe if everything's made from scratch and I'm controlling ingredients, that not only will the client feel more satiated, they won't feel a craving for outside foods, because the foods I'm giving them is so nutrient dense that it's satiating them. And I also believe that I could create a balance of, because most foods we purchase when they're ultra processed, they're extreme. They're extremely salty or they're extremely sweet. And when you can make things from scratch and control the ingredients, you could find a balance. And if you ever learn about macrobiotic diets or that eating, they do that. They talk about if you balance sweetness with savory, that you actually don't crave sweetness as much. You just need a hint. You don't need a
Yeah.
lot. And so it's really just about that balance. And so I just explained it, and I talked from my heart. And at the end of it, she said, well, we'll do what you said. And she was my first private client. I had her for 2 years, and it was a fantastic relationship, and she absolutely achieved everything she wanted. And from that moment on, that's how I entered every situation. So even Tom's people, even Gerard, but like they're people would say, well, this is how he wants to eat. And I'd be like, really? And then I would just ask him, I'd be like, Tom, is this how you want to eat? Because I didn't treat them differently. I treated them
Cool.
just like I would talking to you. It's like, and I think that's why they liked me. I honored their privacy, and B, I didn't treat them like celebrities. I treated them like people. And then I came with an expertise. I wasn't just this like, oh, I'll cook whatever you want. I was like, well, I'm going to make food that's clean and that serves you emotionally, but also satiates you physically.
Yeah. You're true to yourself, and you're taking that, and I could see everyone loving that, that connection to
And
you
well,
and food.
that's why my resume started to build, is because people were seeing such results. And to this day, I'm like, look, there's trends, man. When I entered culinary, when I started private chefing, the big book at the time was called A Fat Flush Diet. And I have, in my 20 years as a professional chef, I have seen trends come and go. But the one that I've always is my North Star that never changes is just eat real food.
Yeah, for sure. Just
That's
like
it.
and you talk a lot about ancestral eating and like just really like you say the clean foods. There's I think a lot of more talk about processed foods now, and people are starting to kind of understand what's in those, and there's all these different all sorts of toxins that come along with that as well. But like, what's the real cost if you were to think of that and the disconnection from eating ancestrally, like with some of the stuff you're doing at Pluck, for instance, with organ meats?
Like, what's the disconnect in our modern times from not
Yeah.
eating these ways?
Yeah, and what's the cost to us? Because it seems like we're just like you mentioned, we're craving sweets or salty, so it just seems like that just throws everything off, in the terms like how we feel, how we're eating.
I think the cost is that, what was it, just 4 years ago, maybe five, the it was the first time in a very long time where the mortality rate had actually increased. So meaning that people were dying at a younger age than ever. And I think that's, we talk a lot about in the industry is kids are our canaries in the coal mine, if you
That's
know that
right.
reference.
Oh yeah.
You bring a canary into the coal mine to give you warning if there's the air quality has changed.
They're kind of leading the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're seeing it. I mean, we're seeing huge chronic health issues across the board, and it's absolutely tapped into the choices we're making, and not just choices that we're putting in our body, choices as a nation, as a globe, as a Earth, like air quality choices, water quality choices, soil quality choices, which all then lead to food choices, which then lead to the choices we make that for the things that go in our mouth. I think that we are absolutely at a place where I believe, and I even started a podcast called Everyday Ancestral, but I believe that looking to the past, that previously I think we looked to the past and we thought we have to get back there. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense because we live in modern times. We have technology. Like, why would we try to go backwards? And I think that's the big mind shift mistake we've made, is that it's not about going backwards. It's about taking the best from the past and bringing it to our present so that we have a better future. And so that's why I now look at ancestral foods. So it's not about like, oh, I'm supposed to only eat ancestral foods. I suppose like there's the Liver King and you're just supposed to eat testicles and raw livers. And it's like, that's not realistic. Like I'll even share like one of the best diets I've ever done in my 20 years. And I've tried a lot. The best one I ever did is called Raw Primal, and it's eating raw meat, raw products like raw dairy, raw meat, anything raw. I felt the best I've ever felt in my
I've heard that
entire life.
actually. I've heard of some folks trying this, and I was like, you got to be
It,
kidding me.
it's
But
incredible, and you don't get sick if you're eating from quality animals. But here's the thing: why am I not eating that way now? It's because it's not practical. Like you
yeah,
can't go to
that's true.
parties, you can't go out to eat. What are you going to eat? You know, what is raw fish every time you eat out or something, or
Yeah.
you just like life is for living. And I think when we create too many limitations, it's like you become Brian Johnson, that guy that's
Oh yeah.
advertising as like you become this kind of like very two-dimensional person. It's like I want to I want to feel connected to the people around me. I want to inspire, and I want to grow and learn. And I don't think you can do that when you're boxed in.
Yeah.
But it was the best diet, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean we should all be doing it.
Well, and I mean, isn't that the thing with diets too, right? They're fads. It's almost like if you cannot sustain something for, let's call it life. I mean, a long period of time, then it's kind of, I don't know if it's any good for you. Maybe it's even worse. Maybe do you have some perspective on that?
I think you tapped it. It's like in my career, I've always looked for this. It's like, I'm not looking for the magic pill or the quick fix. I'm looking for the thing I can sustain. I always laugh because, and maybe I'm revealing my age, but it's like back in the day, there was that Suzanne Summers Thigh Master
Yeah, I
tool,
remember that.
right? You
I
remember
had one
that?
as a kid. Our parents
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Everyone had one. And it's
Yeah.
like, but it's also the thing that is at every yard sale. Maybe not so much, but whatever, 10 years ago it was, you know what I mean? It was at every yard sale. And it's like, dude, like clearly that was a fad. That was a trend. And it's like, I don't want the thigh master of food. Like I don't want the thigh master of diet books. I don't want that. I just want things that are going to be easily sustainable. If we have COVID 5.0, it's like I can still keep doing it. Cuz that's, if anything, look at any kind of epidemic or disaster. It's like, what is the thing that you keep doing when you're in a high emotional state? That's what sustainability is. So what I've found in my career that it has, at least if it's a food, it's got to encompass two qualities. It's got to be both of them, delicious and easy. But if you hit easy and delicious in a health food, so clearly something that's there to support your health and that desired outcome, then it's something you can sustain no matter what is going on emotionally in your life.
Yeah.
Because why would you stop? It tastes good and it's easy to eat or to get into your body.
That's right. I want to pause for a moment and shout out another podcast on the Hubspot podcast network, your audio destination for business professionals. This one's called Augmentors. It's hosted by Julie Mayer and Jimmy Edgerton. And these two, they're a pretty cool duo where one is, Jimmy is a lot more on the loose side. I would say that Julie brings it in and keeps us focused on mentoring and movement. And so these folks, they focus on mentoring and exploring ways on how to augment and refresh kind of like the way that mentoring is applied. And they have these principles that they weave into their episodes, and they give a bunch of practical tips and they lace it with a whole bunch of humor as well. It's always cool when there's a cool duo happening there. So if you're in the mentoring space, or if you have a leadership space, relationship guidance and things like that, that's what the podcast is made for. So you'll get a lot for it. It's great for entrepreneurs, marketers, sales professionals. They love the show as well. It's a great one. I've checked it out and I recommend it. So go listen to Augmentors wherever you get your podcasts. I'm going to do a quick shout out one more time for the thing I talked about at the top of the episode, which is the AI version of me and of this podcast and my YouTube videos and all these things. It all lives within this AI platform. I used Delphi.ai to create it, and I want you to use mine. It's totally free. Go to hustleandflowchart.com/AI Joe. That's hustleandflowchart.com/AI Joe. Test this thing out. It's crazy. You could type with it, talk with it. You can even use video. And you can look up anything from this podcast. You can ask a question about your business, life, any scenario. It kind of learns about you with the information you give it. It's rad. You will love it. And also, there's a lot of people who are asking, how do I get one of these? How do I build it out? The cool thing is my team and I have been building a ton of these every single day. I've used the platform, Delphi.ai, for 2 years. I'm actually one of their advisors because I was one of their first users and just gave them a ton of feedback. I love it. But we build these things. So if you want to use it for lead generation, for, you have all this content as an expert, author, coach type person, we can put that into this digital brain and make it interactive. You could use it for customer service, internal training for your team, for your organization, lots of uses. If you would like one of these, I can pass over an exclusive deal. There's no one else that's offering this out there. I work closely with Delphi as one of their partners, agency partners, to build this out. So hit me up, type hustleandflowchart.com/interest into whatever browser. Again, that's hustleandflowchart.com/interest, and hit me up. Let's build this thing together. All right, back to the episode. That's actually a great metaphor you can apply in so many ways of life, but food, starting here, it's the most obvious. And yeah, it's kind of like what you mentioned earlier. You got the salty and sweet spectrum, right? That a lot of processed foods are going either which way, either far end of the spectrum, but really you can just kind of dash it with both of those. and kind of get that fill, it seems like.
Oh, well, I mean, what's fascinating too is people don't always think about this, but so there's the four tastes that
Hmm.
we were introduced when we were young kids, right? Salty, sweet, bitter, sour, right?
Yep.
Well, there's a fifth called umami.
Mm.
What a lot of people don't realize is that if you think about it, why is someone picky? Like, why was I picky as a kid? Well, there's emotional reasons. Like sometimes your life is unstable, and so what you're choosing to enter your mouth is the only thing you can control, and so that's part of it. There can be an emotional element. We now also have to include, and back then we did not include this, so this is also answering that question of like what's changed. But now you also have to include like chemical differences, like is someone autistic?
Hmm.
Is someone have
Spectrum
some
or
kind of difference going on inside their body that makes them very highly sensitive to texture and flavor from someone that's not in that state, right? So now you have to include that category. But then the other category is just that, well, our palates it's a physical thing. The palate is something that exists and has existed for hundreds of thousands of years to achieve two things: to make sure that either we're nourished or that we don't die.
mm,
So, like, if you think about it, these this kind of communication pathway that happens in our mouth established whether we lived or died back in the day, right?
yeah,
Is this food I'm about to eat going to kill me or nourish me?
yeah.
And so it's so important when we're looking at how do we make someone more adventurous, how do we like get someone to be more nourished, is you think about like, well, what look at what they're currently eating. If they're eating the standard American diet, the primary flavors are salt and sweet,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So that means that their palate is off. It's skewed. If those were colors, it's skewed towards blue and green. We
Yeah.
need to bring more yellow and red into it, and that's the sour and the bitter,
Yep. And then
right?
umami is a fifth kind
And the
of,
umami is the fifth that brings it all together. So that's kind of like it can sometimes be that easy by just shifting, pulling out some of those salty and sweet foods and really heightening more of those other foods. And
Mhm.
sometimes it can be really gradual. That's the other thing that I've learned over my 20 years is that, this idea in America of like go big or go home, like, I'm American, I drive a big truck, that kind of concept. It's like we've seen it. We've existed in this place of like, we go all in. I work hard, I play hard. That
It's all big.
mentality of like,
Yeah.
actually, that is not how human nature works.
Mm-mm.
How human nature works is the things that are actually lifestyle are the things we only do little amounts of a day. Like if
Mhm.
brushing our teeth took 2 hours, I guarantee we have some funky teeth out there.
Very good point.
Right? It's
Yeah.
like it works because it's a small amount of time.
Mm.
We do it a couple times a day, but it's for small amounts. And
Mhm.
so I've really come to realize that the way to tap into human nature and to work with human nature rather than against it is actually to really focus on micro dosing or micro amounts
Mhm.
and then focus on duration. So micro amounts frequently
Yeah.
equals cumulative effect. But when you do that, like that's how I think of the product Pluck actually. It's like I think of it like if the life is the faucet and our bodies are the sponge. When the faucet has a drip of water that comes, the sponge, it gets the entire drop gets absorbed by that sponge.
That's right.
But if I open that faucet up, in tons of that water comes on that sponge, there's all this other water that drips down. And that's what we're seeing right now in this mentality of go big or go home. So we're seeing that, for example, in supplements. When people overdose on supplements, they're
Mhm.
just peeing it out. And that's why we call it, oh, it's expensive pee.
Yeah, it's true.
It's happening all the time and just people don't realize it.
That's a great analogy again. Yeah, I love the analogies, the sponge analogy and how it all absorbs because it's absolutely correct. I mean, just try it. But how much waste and how much just overdoneness, whatever is happening, you can apply it in a lot of places. And that brings me to, because you obviously have your brand Pluck and it's all about organ meats. And you mentioned your podcast, and everything's based in this ancestral concept, these eating habits or behaviors. why organ meats? And like, was there a switch or something where you realized it's that? Like, were you feeling something or a scenario?
Well, the switch was becoming a father. That's hands down. Like I knew about organ meats when I went to culinary school. I
Hmm.
learned about Weston A. Price. There's a book called Nourishing Traditions, and they talked all about traditional foods, the importance of how it's prepared, the importance of organ meats, eating whole animal and raw milk, and all these different things, and why. And so I knew about it then, but I didn't grow up doing that. And what I think a lot of times why we struggle to incorporate anything is that unfamiliarity. Like we don't have practice of doing it. We have to have more routine with it. I didn't have that. And so I struggled to get organ meats into my diet. And then I had kids and I was like, okay, like I want to be around to watch my kids grow up. And I also want to, just like every other parent out there, I want my kids to be healthy, thriving, and happy.
Yeah.
So, what foods are going to support that for both of us? And then I just did some searching on the internet. So, not internal searching, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
searching on the internet. And anyone can do this. And it's like, what are the most nutrient dense foods? And every indicator came back organ meats. And
Wow.
normally it would say beef liver, but I have actually expanded way beyond that now.
Ooh.
Um, and why do they focus on organ meats? Well, first of all, if you think about what's in a prenatal, like what science is telling you, this is what you need to create life. If you look at the list of vitamins and minerals, it's all in organ meat.
Hmm.
And what's sad to me is that when we slaughter that cow, which is really, I mean, like I'm not inhumane. Like I believe that's something we need to honor. Like we
Hmm.
just took a life,
Hmm.
but we took that life to feed us, and that's always going to be the case. Even if you're vegan, there's still something dying when those
That's right.
plants are being harvested to feed you, right? For us to live, something dies. That's just across the board. And if anyone doesn't believe that, I think you need to look a little deeper because talk to a farmer and they will tell you. Talk to a monocrop farmer and they will tell you it's like a freaking horror show when they plow those soybean fields. All the different animals, insects, and critters that are housed in
True.
those fields get decimated. So
And that's,
something
I didn't even
dies.
think about that, but you're right. There's all this death happening. Yeah.
Always,
Hmm.
always. It's whether you just want to admit it or not, right? But so there's
Sure.
always something's dying to feed us. But when we slaughter a cow, we are currently, for most slaughterhouses, we're only using 50% of that cow.
Wow.
This is a business podcast. What business would take their resources and only use 50% of them? Like
Hmm.
that would be the worst business plan in the entire world. So we are right now wasting about 50% of that animal. So to me, one of the most planetary things we could do is just start eating whole animal because what's happening is we're only utilizing 50% of the animal. The most nutritious part of the animal is getting trashed. And then what are we doing? Well, we're nutrient deficient. Like a 2015 study came to about 92% of Americans are nutrient deficient. And
Wow.
we're in 2025 now, so that's probably close to 94%, right?
Yeah.
So if 94% of Americans are nutrient deficient, but we're not calorie deficient because we're an obese
Sure.
nation,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
then what's the issue? It's clearly the food choices we're making. Well, we're trashing the most nutritious part of that animal, and then what do? We turn around and we feed a $50 billion industry of supplements to
Mhm.
try to compensate for what we didn't get from what we ate. And to me, that's madness.
Ooh. It is. And there's so much waste, so it's not just that part, and it's not honoring the animal just in that whole side of things, but it's not even honoring ourselves. And I'm sure there's reasons for that. People, I think there's probably associations to organs, and just that
Yeah,
concept of
yeah.
organ meat. So like, what would
Yeah,
you?
I think it brings up your mortality. I really do.
Mm.
I think that that's definitely something I've been messing around with and thinking about is like when you hear of a liver, you think your own liver. When you hear of a heart, you think you the beating of your own heart. And I think that that's what we're really icked out about, whether we want to admit it or not. Because most people will say, "Oh, that's gross," and they've never even tried them
Yeah.
because they're not. It's actually not gross. Like you
Good
talk to
point.
anyone that truly eats whole animal. Like, I'll give you a story. There's this woman who has a website called Awfully Good Cooking. Her family is one of the most amazing families because they actually walk their talk. They truly eat whole animal. Every week they're eating a different part of that animal. They've eaten brain. They've eaten tripe, which is the
Tendon? Is it?
stomach
Or
lining is
stomach? Yeah.
tripe.
Yeah.
And then they've also done lung. I mean, they've done so many parts. And this woman's kids, when her kids ask, like on their birthday, she said, we'll make whatever meal you want. They ask for menudo, which is a Mexican soup dish with tripe in it.
Yeah.
And most people go like, tripe, that's gross. But if you actually prepare it properly, and you eat it, it's why these kids chose it. It's an incredibly delicious, soothing meal. Like, it feeds you literally, but it also feeds your soul.
Yeah.
And that's what these young kids are asking for their birthdays. But
And
no
isn't
one would know
tripe?
that.
I think it's in pho as well, right?
Yes,
The
it can be.
Vietnamese.
Yep.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, if you choose it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so organ meats in general and like what you're talking about, and obviously it sounds like this is why you went on a mission with Pluck. And maybe you just tell me a little bit about that and how you're approaching this whole scenario with your own product, because it's obviously what you believe in. Yeah.
Once I identified, like, okay, I wanted to feed my kids the most nutritious food. Well, I identified organ meats, but then I identified what are the three main hurdles. So first, we have people think it's gross.
Yeah.
Second, most people don't know how to cook it. We've lost the art of cooking it. And most people, if they do cook it, they overcook it. And that's one thing I'll just share, is that when it's raw, it's actually at its tastiest. And as you cook it, it can get stronger. And like, when you overcook liver, it gets stronger, not less strong. So
It's the opposite. Okay.
yeah, so people that are like, ooh, taken back by liver, it's probably because you overcooked it.
Interesting.
And then the third one is that people don't know where to source it. Some people don't have access to it. And so, and then I guess the third is people know that they should be eating it. They are taking it in the form of a capsule, and they they get either capsule fatigue or they're inconsistent. You buy it 1 month and you forget to take it. We're just inconsistent with capsules. And so, once I identified those four hurdles, I was like, okay, what do I do here? And really, I mean, that's kind of the uniqueness of me as a chef. Like, I've always kind of thought outside the box, and I'm always kind of trying to feel out. I don't have, my training is not such that it keeps me boxed in, like where I only do French cooking, or I only do Asian cooking. Like, I'm not boxed in by a certain method of how to do things. So I'm always trying different things. I'm always thinking like, well, but what's the most practical use of this? And so what I basically did was, I was like, okay, we already have freeze drying, and that's a preservation technique. And it not only does it preserve it from spoiling, but it also preserves the nutrients. So they're already using it in capsules. And then we have dried herbs, and we have seasonings that are also shelf stable and made to last. So I was like, well, technically, when you make a pate, that's what you're doing, is you're taking the organs and you're cooking them with different vegetables and herbs to make them taste good.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
why can't I just do that on a dry level? And that's where I started to piece together Pluck, which is really a ancestral superfood, but it's basically taking freeze-dried powdered liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas, combining it with salt, and then organic spices and herbs. And so what we've created is a seasoning that you microdose frequently, because we all season our food. So every time you eat, just sprinkle it on your food, and you're then getting cumulative effect of the organs. We have kind of something for everyone. We have 3 flavors that all will also brighten the food, because the umami in the organ meats actually makes the food taste better. So if you want to be deemed a better chef, you just put Pluck on there, and everyone thinks you're amazing. And
That's
you
the
don't even
hack.
have to tell them it's Pluck. Just pretend it's you. That's all
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I love it.
And then
Yeah.
we have a fourth product, which is just pure, and that's just the organ meat. So that's for those people that are like, hey, I've been tested, I'm anemic, I really need a certain amount of nutrients. Great, we have that for you. I just want you to eat it versus swallowed in a capsule. And 1 teaspoon of that is equal to 2 ounces of organs. That's how concentrated it is.
1 teaspoon. Okay, because I was going to ask, I'm like, is this enough if it's just as, you're sprinkling it on or you using it as flavoring?
What's fascinating is it really does go back to that what I was saying about that whole, like, we have this American mentality of go big or go home,
Yeah.
but it's like, is a small amount enough? Well, I should say, is small amount enough, said the cocaine user who
I
just tried a little bit and was like, "Whoop, whoop, whoop," right? So clearly, like, there's aspects of life where when it's small amounts, just like that sponge analogy, actually our body is able to absorb it. Like, if I take capsules with too much vitamin A or any vitamin, I'm going to pee it out.
Yep.
But if I'm getting a little bit, and we typically eat 3 times or more a day, so if I'm using let's say half a teaspoon every time, even a teaspoon, I'm getting nearly a tablespoon a day of this. And what's fascinating is we've gotten feedback, is people get their blood tested and they'll say, like, oh, it's showing up in my blood markers, I'm no longer anemic. Or
Wow.
people that had skin issues, my skin issues started going away. Or people that had issues around with the birth or their child. Like, this one woman messaged us and said she was on her 3rd child, and the first 2 she had she had very little milk supply, and then she had blood hemorrhage, a lot of hemorrhaging.
Mm.
And she said the only thing she did different for her 3rd one is she used Pluck, the seasoning, not the pure, from beginning to end. And she said she had an abundance of milk and she had no hemorrhaging. And I
Wow.
talked to midwives, and they're like, oh, yeah, I always know if the female had organ meats because the placenta is gorgeous. It's a beautiful, rich color, and it's a nice size, like,
Yeah.
across the board.
Wow.
So we cannot underestimate how powerful these ancestral foods are. Our bodies were designed for them. There's this guy, Bill Schindler. He's a professor of archaeology.
Uh-huh.
He will tell you that basically, he wrote a book called Eat Like a Human, and he'll tell you that basically we were foragers first, then we were scavengers. So we did get some meat protein,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't until we became the predator, and we got 3 things that we did not have previously. That's when our bodies changed. That's when our brains got bigger. That's when we entered the Homo sapien
Yeah.
body
I've
that we're
heard.
in right now. So this is
Yep.
like 300,000 years ago, right? And those 3 things were blood, fat, and organs. Those were the Mother Nature's multivitamin that gave us the punch to then evolve our brains to be bigger and our guts to be smaller. So we lost some ability to eat just random foods, but we gained a brain that enabled us to create language, to create cities, to create all these amazing,
Wow.
modern tools that we have to this day.
I'm going to pick that book up because I've heard some sprinkles of that concept in what you just said there, but that it makes perfect sense. That
Oh,
evolution of path. Yeah.
he's got this great quote, Joe. He says, "We are the only species in the world that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat."
Yeah. That's a good
Like,
point.
but it goes even deeper when you realize actually there's over 8 million species. So what the heck happened to us?
What's wrong with us? Or maybe
We're
what's
the
right with us? Yeah.
Yeah, well, who knows? But
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like that's crazy, and it tells you that we did know. We used to have an instinct about what we did, and that's why I'm a big follower or believer of you got to eat your food, because when you swallow, let's say salt, a salt tablet, you get a delayed response. Why am I bloated? Oh, I got too much of that salt. But if
Sure.
I put salt on your tongue, your body won't let me give you too much. The salt, the flavor of the salt changes.
Mm.
Like by the 3rd or 4th time I put a dab on your tongue, it literally tastes different, and it kind of tastes disgusting. Your body's rejecting it. And that's
Wow.
a communication pathway that's been developed for hundreds of thousands of years. Why are we not using that?
Hmm.
It kept us alive. It kept us so that we could evolve to who we are now.
Yeah.
Like, we need to use it. So you have to eat. Like, so in a sense, when I'm even telling people, and I know this is a business, but here's the thing.
Well, good. We're living life.
Yeah, right. And for us to be good in business, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. So here's the
Absolutely.
deal. Like, I would break down 3 main criteria for what food you allow to pass into your body. First is you look for flavors that are found in nature, not natural flavors, not artificial flavors, but flavors that are found in nature, meaning that they haven't been adulterated, they haven't been added to the product. They're just in the product because of how it's grown, or yeah, or just yeah, how it's grown.
Hmm.
So that would be one. Two would be nutrient dense foods. So foods that have nutrients in them, not fortified foods, not foods that have been fabricated to have nutrients, but foods that have nutrients, nutrient dense foods. And then the third one is the one that most people don't think about, and they also we don't talk about it enough, which is now just eat those foods mindfully.
Mm.
Like, don't eat rushing. Don't be eating in your car as you're driving through traffic. Don't mindfully just grab, stuff off the shelves because it's cheap,
Eating
or
and looking,
yeah.
yeah.
Don't be watching while you eat. Don't like be eating around people that stress you out. Don't just mindfully grab things from the grocery store because you're hangry. You know what I mean? It's like be mindful, and you'll start to see. So eating those nutrient dense foods mindfully, even how you prepare them, be more mindful.
Yeah.
Take a moment before you eat, to say grace, to pray, or to take a breath, put your fork down in between bites, little things like that, just to slow down.
Yeah.
See, your body will be able to tell you when it's full. It will be able to communicate to you, do you want more or less of this? Because it has the time to do it.
Mm. And you're letting your body work for you. Yeah, it's
Totally.
we live in such a fast-paced world, and I've noticed as I've gotten older, well, also have had kids, I've sped up my eating, but like back in the day when I was a kid, I would take my time. I was always like, Joe's the slowest eater. I'm like, I chew more, and I think it helps with digestion, I've heard.
Well,
So,
and were you shamed for it? Because some kids, when they're slow, they get shamed for it, and that's why they
a
speed
little
up. But
bit. I didn't
yeah,
take it as, but I definitely, yeah, it was mentioned many times. I was like the slowest guy at the table. Yeah,
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 right. And so that affects us because we want to be like everyone else. And it's like,
right.
actually, Joe had it right. Little Joe was the
Uh-huh.
one who was doing it mindfully and like taking his time. And that was actually, I mean, that to me is a beautiful example of like, a lot of times we know what we need. Like it's in our bodies. And when
Yeah,
we're young, that's typically a time where we're not as influenced by others.
that's true.
And we just follow the beat of our drum. And I would recommend everyone think back and kind of reevaluate. Well, what was I like when I was little around these foods or around the behavior of how with my own self?
And definitely, it comes out with I've two little ones, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. So it's
Oh,
you
you're
see,
in it.
oh my gosh, yeah. And I know you're passionate about this as well, and this is how Pluck can tie in, and you're introducing these to your kids as well. So that's what I'm gonna do, and it's not forcing it because there's definitely a relationship there with food that you want to let them explore their own worlds. They're human just like we are, and we've all gone through phases of foods, and our palates are changing all the time. I forget how often, maybe but it's your taste buds are actually adapting differently to often.
I think it'll be exciting when you start incorporating pluck with them too, because what
Yeah,
the feedback we get is, first of all, like, we all have those days that go sideways, like, oh, I didn't meal plan. We're just tired. Let's just order pizza. Right. And
right.
I usually kind of feel a little bummed out that I'm, not giving my kids something more nutritious.
Hmm.
But then what I do is I just sprinkle pluck on it and they love it. It tastes good. And they're like, cool. Thanks, Dad. Like,
Yeah.
love it. So like you can literally sprinkle it on French fry. You can put it on anything. We put it on
Right.
popcorn when we have family night, movie night, and the kids love it. Like many of us can't even eat popcorn without it because it's so flavorful
Yeah.
and you can't get that flavor from pretty much anything else. That now things that are normally kind of plain, like eggs and popcorn and even toast, like you put it on there and it just brightens it. It makes it so delicious and craveable that
Yeah.
you'll see your kids' palate change. You'll see they'll actually get more interested in the food they're eating, and then hopefully, if there is something going on, but just in general, hopefully you start to see any kind of health stuff go away, or you just see energy changes, you see clarity of mind. I mean, it's incredible when you start
That's
getting this natural Mother Nature's multivitamin into your kids and yourself. It truly is miraculous, but
well,
yet it's not a miracle. It's just
it's
Mother
it's
Nature.
it's Mother Nature. It's how it was intended, and we're just fitting right back into it. So, it's a disconnected world in a lot of senses. So thank you, James, for enlightening, because I didn't know much of anything about this world. And that's what fascinated me when you said yes to doing the pod here. So I know after this, I'm getting some Pluck. I'm going to get the spicy one. I'm all about the spice. So, that's, that'll be one of them. And I
Oh,
want to shout out.
we
Go ahead.
have. Oh, I should send you. So you like like really hot
Oh,
stuff?
that's my jam. Yeah.
Okay, you gotta email me your address later because we have a new flavor that's going to be coming out, and I need feedback.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
I'm your man.
and it probably won't be out when this podcast comes out, but it will be getting closer. But it's
Cool.
habanero lime, and I'll send that to you because it's hot. Like
Okay. I'm in. Thank you.
okay.
Well, and a gift to everyone watching, listening. James is hooking you up. Like I mentioned earlier, 20% off if you go to hustleandflowchart.com/pluck, Pluck, and you just add the products. I was testing it out, and 20% off. So, and you'll learn a lot too. There's recipes. Your podcast is on there at
We have a
eatpluck.com.
blog actually that just started too that
Cool.
I'm really happy with. It's really putting out a lot of topics that I think are really top of mind, like
Good.
lead and salt. Those kind of topics that I think a lot of people are concerned about.
Yeah, well, soon to be, you'll also have a digital mind, kind of a digital clone of yourself that we're working on together.
Yeah,
And I
that's gonna be
mention Delphi
super
all the
fun.
time, so yeah, hopefully that shows up on there as well occasionally.
It will.
All right, James, I appreciate you so much. This was fun. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for having me on, Joe.
Of course.